Meet me at the Musial with Alan and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good evening and welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shop at C70. Alan Mudlock's still out. We've got a little bit of a coach's corner at the end of this, talking about his first week of baseball at Tulsa Hale. But joining me today is Will Leitch. You know Will Leitch from probably everywhere because the man writes every time. I think he's probably writing now, even though he's in a car and even though he's on a podcast, he is probably writing something right this moment. Will, how are you tonight?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to do this in the car. We had scheduled this a while ago, and I did not know that I would have a movie screening I had to see tonight. So I just saw the movie Love Lies Bleeding with Kristen Stewart and Ed Harris. It is not so hot, but the goal for this is for it to be the Cardinal season. It's not as bad as last year's Cardinal season, but I do expect this year's Cardinal season to be better than the movie.
Well, I hope so. Hopefully that's a bar that this team can clear. Before we get into the Cardinals, though, let's talk about how you do this, because you do write constantly. I mean, you're writing your third book, your third nonfiction or fiction book, because you've written your sports books a number of years ago. You're writing at MLB.com. You're writing at the New York Magazine. You've got your podcast and writing for movies. When do you breathe?
I'm actually more worried about to make sure it's funny. All my spare time is actually just like, hanging out with the people that live in the house with me. I keep forgetting. I try not to forget that they're around either. For me, I say this a lot and it sounds silly, but like, it really is just organization. I'm an anal retentive schedule. I'm very task driven. I just keep very, very organized. If you keep really organized, you can actually get everything done. You are talking to one of those crazy people that actually is an email box zero person.
Oof.
Like I clear it out at the end of every day, so I'm a very organized person. I realized kind of early on that there were a lot of people that were a lot better writers than me, so I was going to have to outwork them, and the only way I knew how to do that was being really organized. So I don't know if the stuff I make is the best stuff, but I certainly can turn stuff in on time, and I'll give myself that.
It's always enjoyable to read it. Does it help that it is such different genres that if you don't get tired of something, you get to kind of refresh your palate every once in a while with something else?
I will say, I mean, people, when I was on my last book tour, people were like, what happens? Are you still going to write about baseball if this book sells like 40 million John Grisham, Stephen King level copies? It didn't, so I don't have to worry about that problem. But if one of these books if it turns into Where the Crawdads Sing or some massive bestseller, I will still write about baseball and I will still do this stuff. For me, sure, I think if I were just writing about baseball, I would be restless. But frankly, if I were just writing just writing books, I would be restless. Just writing about movies, my hero growing up was Roger Ebert, and Ebert was a great film critic. He's from Central Illinois. I'm from Mattoon, Illinois. He's from Central Illinois like me, and the thing he said when he went to the Daily Illini, which is where I worked in college as well, because I went to the University of Illinois, which is the place, by the way, that's not the school that's not 0-17 in college basketball this year. Sorry, Mizzou fans. But I will say that he said when he went to the Daily Illini, he learned his three favorite words in the English language by Roger Ebert. And I always appreciated that. I always appreciated the idea that it's being in love with the act of creating and always trying to do new things and push yourself. I did Deadspin for a long time, and it was a long time ago that I did it. And one of the reasons I left, because I started to realize that, I'm pretty good at writing a blog post. What else can I do? Because I don't want to do this I don't want to get stuck just doing this. And so for me, it's just this old improv idea. If anyone's ever done improv comedy, you're supposed to say yes and to every scenario. So I always just say yes yes and like whatever I can try, I'll just do it, it might not be good, but I'm gonna go ahead and give it a try anyway.
Well, and one of those yes ands would be, as Cardinal fans know, the podcast with Bernie Miklasz called Seeing Red. I know this is what, man, I don't remember how many years have you been doing this? It's been a while.
Yeah, we actually did it first when he was back with the old, back at his old station, and then he
Right.
switched stations, and then we took a year off until we got back going again. But like I think like a lot of people, a lot of Cardinals fans grew up reading Bernie, and to me he's the best. Like the idea that I get to talk. I'm very happy that people like it, but I would do it if they were not recording it.
Yeah.
Like I get to talk to Bernie every week is a delight, and so it's a really fun show to do. That Bernie has forgotten 50,000 times more than I will ever know about Cardinals baseball, but he's still Bernie. I think that like I've worked in sports media for a long time, and certainly a lot of people will reach a certain level of renown or success, and they just kind of chill after that. But Bernie is the same guy. He's definitely not the guy that's like, oh, this is my seat in the press box. Don't you know who I am? Like he's Bernie.
Right.
He's Bernie, and I respect that. To get to talk to him every week is just my happy thing. I would talk about the Cardinals to a wall, but to get to talk about with Bernie is it's the highlight of my week.
I imagine it is. Even when it's as bad as last year.
Ooh,
And
it was bad. Yeah, it was bad.
I don't really want to rehash too. Yeah, I don't want to rehash last year too much, but I mean, just what do you think you took away from watching that, which was a year like you hadn't seen in well, most of your life?
I learned that it can happen, and hopefully the Cardinals also got that lesson. And I worry a little bit sometimes. I think that,
Right.
I a lot of times I'll think of, I'm 48 years old, and I started watching the Cardinals in 1982 when I was 6 years old. And of course, they won the World Series. I was like, this is amazing. Does this happen every year? And then it didn't happen for 24 years. But one of the things when you've watched, when you follow the team as long as I have, and followed the team as long as my father has, who of course got me into the Cardinals, you realize, I remember the 90s. I remember the last Cardinals team that finished in last, and I do think there's a certain sense that can, with parts of the fan base, but I would argue even in a larger sense, sometimes within the organization itself, that because things have been like this for a while, they will always be that way. But I remember that 1990 team. I remember, worrying that Anheuser-Busch was going to sell them. They were going to move to East St. Louis, or someone not local was going to buy the team. I remember what it was like when Busch Stadium was 1/3 full because the team was terrible and it was going to be up for sale. It is not written in granite, taken from a mountaintop, that the Cardinals are going to be successful every year. It's not. And I think that as frustrating as that was, I think it is a good reminder that things aren't just great just because they're the Cardinals, and just because the organization has had a plan that's worked in the past, means it's always going to work in the future. So it was obviously a difficult year, to say the least. But I do think that there hopefully will be some value in knowing that it happened, and people dedicating themselves to making sure it does not happen again.
Which then, of course, leads to this winter and the question of, did they learn to that? Is it a, hey, this can happen, or do you think the front office? It's hard to tell. They may have had that idea of, it happened, but it was a fluke and it won't happen again. And I'm a little bit concerned that that's their motto.
I've talked to Bernie about this a lot, and Bernie always, Bernie knows I've never talked to Bill DeWitt. I don't call him Mr. DeWitt like everyone always seems to call him. So I don't know any of those people. I've never met Mo. I've met Michael Gersh, and I've met some people in the organization, but I don't know. I don't live in St. Louis. I don't know. I don't. I'm a fan. I'm on the outside, and so for me, Bernie's a little tapped in more into that, and I think I kind of believe what Bernie's saying, which is I think the front office knows.
Mm-hmm.
The question is whether the DeWitts know, and I don't. By that, I don't mean that they know. Do they understand? Listen, I think Mo wants to do a lot of stuff, and I think that Mo in the past has maybe had a little bit more freedom to do a lot of stuff, and I think, whether it's whether it's the television situation, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's I think there a variety of other things. I think there is whether it's just the fail the we have a succession sort of thing where the kids don't quite understand where all the money came from and why this is working. But I do think that the moves I think Mo made at the very beginning had the level of urgency and immediacy that I was wanting to see out of the off season, and the fact that it stopped after that. That doesn't seem like Mo was just like, okay, I'm done. We've done everything here. I think there's probably more that he wanted and planned to do, and I think that, I mean, listen, I am not of the idea that the DeWitt family is cheap and does not want to put a winning product on the field. I don't think that's fair. I think they've got 20 years of success that would belie that. But it's also impossible to look at the trends with what they've done with the payroll relative to the rest of the league. It's gone lower. It's gone lower during a time when the fans have not, the fan base has not gone away. The Cardinals have not become less popular. If anything, 2022 had to have been one of the most lucrative years in Cardinals history. And so, I think that the fact that a lot of the moves were not made or there seemed to be a certain governor on some of those moves does not seem to me like Mo and Gersh, and I guess now, some of the new people that are around, that does not seem to me like the Cardinals front office not understanding the seriousness of the situation. I just think that, there is. I wonder what would happen if the Cardinals were in the AL East, right? Don't you think about that sometimes?
Yeah.
Like, I think that, if the fact that no one has pushed them. And listen, when the Cubs started that spending last decade, I actually thought, okay, well, the Cardinals got to start singing for their supper. And I'm really not sure they have. I'm not sure they met that challenge. They were kind of fortunate that the Cubs had, frankly, a worse ownership situation and a worse kind of a handling of their team. But, the idea that the Cardinals are supposed to be special and different, and because of the fan base and the dedication the fan base has, I don't know if I see that from the ownership group right now. It doesn't mean they're not spending. It doesn't mean they don't care. I just, I always say that the Cardinals are a public trust. Obviously they're a corporation. Obviously everyone's trying to make money, but they're a public trust. They are the reason the Cardinals are successful. The reason the Cardinals have this history is because of the fans. It's not because St. Louis has 50 million people. It's not because they have this. It's because the Cardinals have this vast fan base that allows them to do that. When they don't honor that, and they do not seem as appropriately ashamed by what last year was, I think that's concerning.
Yeah, I think that's true, and you're right. It's very easy for us to blame the front office when we don't necessarily know all the parameters that they're given. If the payroll was 300 million and Mo was just like, oh well, we're good here, then that's obviously a different story. But that's not the way it goes. So,
and I'm not even asking to be 300 million.
Sure.
It's just that this team has clear, obvious holes, and does not seem to me, and depth being the primary one, right? And I think that I actually feel like the moves they've made have not been bad ones. I actually feel like I think that a lot of the bullpen moves in particular,
Right.
whether it's Heim, Bloom, or anywhere else, they make sense. I understand it, and I don't think it would have been smart to go give Josh Hader $15-20 million a year for the next 5 years. I understand the idea. It's not like go get everybody I want and spin whatever. But the idea that, we've seen it with the Sonny Gray thing, right? They have given themselves no wiggle room and no fail safes in a situation where I think they are underestimating the ramifications if things crater like they did last year.
Yeah, because the Sonny Gray's hamstring put into very stark relief something that I know you and all of us have talked about this winter, and the fact that this rotation is Sonny Gray and whatever the backup singers are, and if the lead man's gone, nobody turns in for the backup singers. So it does make you worry. I mean, Jordan Montgomery's still out there. There's, who knows? Obviously, a deal with Jordan Montgomery puts you over the first level of luxury tax, but still, they've never done that. It's not going to be that much more. But it just feels like, well, we've got these guys. We'll just try them out, and if it doesn't work, well, we're in the NL Central. It'll be okay.
Yeah, that's worrisome. Like, listen, I would have understood that strategy before last year.
Mm,
Like, and I think that listen, they made mistakes that led to that problem last year. But for the record, I picked the Cardinals to win the division
right.
heading into last year, and a lot of people did. So I think that the idea that they're just a bunch of boobs that don't know anything and didn't do anything, and we were the smart ones. That's not fair. But
Mm,
but the problem is last year happened. Last year happened, and that is the opposite of the way this is supposed to work. And I think the worry that I think a lot of Cardinals fans have is that there's a certain complacency that is settled in within the organization. And I think frankly, you see it outside of just baseball. I think you see it. I think you see it with Ballpark Village. I think you see it in some of the the details. Like we talked about that, we talked about this in the podcast, but like that London trip last year. That London trip last year, I went. It was a wonderful time. I had a great time with my family. There were several events organized by the Cubs for Cubs fans. There were
mm,
none for Cardinals fans. And like whatever,
mm,
that's a small little thing, right? But it's indicative of the larger idea, which is there is a sense, in my opinion, and I think that Cardinal fans can feel this, that like the Cardinals we're going to be fine. The Cardinals fans aren't going anywhere. We've always done this. We've always made money. We've always won. Everything's fine. And that leads you to look at a year like last year and be like, oh, it's an aberration. We're going to be fine, and not have the urgency that I think they need to have, because it's not just about last year. I remember the 90s. I remember what happened when things got bad for 2 or 3 years, and you needed, like, 96 was an exciting year, but it was not until McGuire that
mm.
really Cardinals fans got super excited about that team again. I used to always joke, I lived in St. Louis during the 98 season, and I always joked that like there were so many new fans that every time McGuire hit a pop-up, they'd go, whoa, there it goes, because because I was like, oh, but that's good. You were bringing in
Right.
new fans. You were bringing back old fans. I think there is a sense of well, it's always been like this, and so one bad year's not going to kill us. Maybe not, but two might. And I think that
Mm.
the idea that Cardinals fans will just come back no matter what forever is belied by a history that's not so ancient that I can remember it as an adult. And so that's the worry. Is not I understand. I think it could work. I actually have. I think Zach Thompson. There are teams that have worse six starters than Zach Thompson. Like, I don't think that's like a
Mm.
terrible plan. The problem is if it doesn't work, you're looking at another year like last year. And I don't know. I think they underestimate how bad that is, not just for like the people currently in charge, but for fans' faith in the franchise, which is what makes the Cardinals work. Faith, the Cardinals
Hmm.
fans believing in the franchise are the reason the Cardinals can be the Cardinals, and they're not the Royals, or they're not the Brewers. The Brewers are a bad example because they have a really good fan base, but they're not they're not the Reds. The reason that they're not that is because the Cardinals fans are always there and demand this. For them to respond to a year as bad as last year, as casually as they have, I think that's concerning.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at that '96 team; they had to go out and import half the Oakland A's, and you can't do that now because
Yeah,
that's not going to
right.
make you. That's not going to make you any good.
Yeah,
But, um, but yeah, I think it's. I do. I think it's very interesting. And again, I've talked about this with some of the other guests over the last few weeks, but just how everything seems to be setting up for a significant turnover. So short-term contracts, most contracts coming up, all this kind of stuff feels like it almost feels like they're giving us one last go, and then if it doesn't work, then we're wiping the page clean, and that's not something that Cardinal fans are used to.
Yeah, and the ramification. I think that wiping the page clean is asking for trouble. Like I really do, because I remember the last time they wiped the page clean, and it was a mess. It took that '96 team. It basically took finding a Hall of Fame manager who was who was leaving an organization that didn't appreciate him and take care of him, and giving him absolute control and letting all of his old buddies come and fix it. That's not happening. That's not how baseball
Right.
works now, right? And I think and even after that, it still took. It took the most exciting thing that had happened in baseball in a couple of decades with the home run chase to recharge it too. So I think that I don't. And listen, wiping the slate clean can also mean a lot of things. It can mean a new general manager. It can mean a new manager. It could mean new ownership, for crying out loud. Like, it could mean a lot of things. I think that the idea of selling a baseball team right now. If I were someone that wanted to make sure I was taken care of forever and didn't have to deal with all of this stuff, now would be the time to sell. The teams are selling for a lot of money right now. I'm not saying they're going to do that, but I'm saying if you were going to do that, this would be how you would go about it.
This is true. And of course, I'm just thinking about the capital gains taxes that we're paying on that thing. But that's up to them. If you're making that much money, you can afford the taxes, I guess.
I think they're going to be all right. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll probably manage. So we have actually gotten baseball on the field, and it's spring training. You take what you want out of it, except for Sonny Gray's hamstring, which was serious no matter when you do it. What has struck your eye maybe in the early going of spring training?
I think for me, it's hard. It's been hard because you're like Lynn. Like a lot. Let's forget Gray. I think Matz has thrown one inning. Lynn hasn't. Lynn's supposedly doing fine on the backfield, but we haven't seen those guys. And whatever, you might not see that much from spring training, from them in spring anyway. But I do think there's something to the idea of the number one question about this team is rotation. We really haven't seen very much of it, and also I have not seen a lot. Like Michaelis is supposedly the slider is the thing that's going to fix whatever was going on last year. It's up in the air. I will say, however, I do think it is fascinating to see whatever questions we may have about how maybe long it took Edmund to maybe have that surgery and how long and how kind of by surprise that seems to have taken them. I think we're going to get a lot of questions answered about Dylan Carlson. I think we're going to get a lot of questions answered about Mason Wynn that need to be answered and probably need to be answered soon. And so I think there's value in that. But frankly, after last spring training, I kind of don't want to. We spent what are the two things that happened last spring training? They had the best record in the Grapefruit League, and everyone told us that it was no big deal that they were all at the WBC until they started losing a lot, and then it was a big deal that they were all at the WBC. And why did you pay any attention to the Grapefruit League standings? So I'm generally wary of anything around that, other than to say I'm excited about the notion of like a Victor Scott II kind of laying the groundwork to doing this year kind of what Mason Wynn did last spring training. I think that is something that makes a lot of logical sense. Hopefully he will not have a month to just play there because the Cardinals are out of the playoffs. But I do think that's what I kind of look for. I honestly find the fact that Carpenter and Crawford were signed, I'll say it made spring a little bit less interesting to me, because I was actually pretty curious. What is Burleson going to do? What is Baker? To me, I'm still kind of intrigued by Luken Baker. Like, I'm not giving up that ghost just yet. You don't really hit like he did in Memphis for intensely as he did, and like the idea of a quad A player, that's not like, that's more just like an urban legend. Like that's not like they track these things now. Like they know he can hit. So I'm intrigued by him, but there's no place for him to go now. There's no place for
Mm.
him to be there. Burleson, I think maybe, but it's still cutting it tightly. And that may be just because Edmund's not there. So I think that a lot of the intriguing little position battles that we might have seen in the past have not been a part of this spring. I think that may be a good thing because considering how much chaos we had going into last year. I mentioned this with Bernie on the show last week, but the first little sign of the chaos and troubles that were coming in 2023 really came with the Tyler O'Neill thing. And what borne that out? The whole stress that they were kind of putting on Marmol and O'Neill and
Mhm.
Carlson and all of these guys, the idea like, hey, it's competition. It's competition. We're having tryouts. You're going to have to compete for every spot. And I think having some set roles and having set positions and set stuff, even with Edmund's injury, I think there's benefit to that. So I think the fact that it seems to me there's fewer questions other than with the rotation, but certainly with the offense, there's fewer questions and there's more set roles. After what happened last spring, that seems like positive. So I'm kind of enjoying, other than the Sonny Gray thing, of course, there's just less overarching drama and we're all fighting for spots, so you better be hustling, O'Neill. Like a lot of that stuff has been cleared out, and frankly, I think that eases burden on Marmol because I think he did not handle a lot of situations great last year in a way that I was hoping that he would, and I think they've kind of taken that off his plate. I think a little bit this year.
So, I mean, we from seeing red, especially in the Matheny years, we know what you thought of that manager. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts about Marmol? Are you worried about any kind of Matheny redo, or is he a little bit more encouraging to you?
Oh, I mean, the pick a name from the phone book, and it's more encouraging than Matheny. I mean, for crying out loud. I mean, people get that. That was the listen. There was a lot to be frustrated about with Marmol last year, but when I started hearing that, wow, when Matheny won this many games, you were not there. Like that was madness. Like I cannot believe that man was manager of the Cardinals for as long as he was. Whatever issues I may have with Marmol, they're like, and the Marmol is managing for his job and should be managing for his job. And there were a lot of things that were very concerning. But man, like he is not Matheny. That was a disaster. And so yeah, I think that but yeah, I think those, I do think we saw last year because I think he did. I think it's kind of a little underappreciated. I think he actually did a pretty great job in 2022, and I think a lot of that was knowing when to step back. There were obviously leaders in that clubhouse with Pools and Wainwright and Molina and all those guys were there, and I think that eased the burden. But that came with its own challenges, right?
Right,
That came with its
right.
own challenges to have those big guys in there for a first-time manager who never played the game. And certainly, God forbid, an umpire ever say that to him again because he'll freak out about it. And so, I think that that came with its own challenges. I think he handled them well. But Bernie and I have talked about the idea, something about when the pressure gets on. And I think we saw it in that postseason series, and we saw it early last year. I don't think the Contreras thing last year was his fault. I think he kind of had to be the public messenger on that. But I don't think he did a great job of messaging that. There's a lot of the job now of a manager. I've wrote about this for MLB a few years ago. A lot of the job of a manager now is actually just kind of to be a middle manager, right? And,
Mhm.
and I think there's pushback on that. I think the new kind of generation of managers, I think Craig Counsell himself is trying to fight against that idea a little bit. But in a lot of ways, Marmol was hired to the way a lot of managers are hired now. To be liaisons between the front office and the clubhouse. And that's a tough job. That's a tough job, and it takes a certain kind of personality to do it. And I think last year, when things kind of got haywire, I think Marmol struggled. For the record, I also think Mo struggled. I think the way that he handled the Contreras thing, there's just the Cardinals, the whole front office and the whole franchise was put in situations last year that they were very unaccustomed to, and I don't think they always handled them well. To be fair, as a fan, I was put into several situations. We were all put into several situations last year that we were not accustomed to, and we did not respond well.
No.
So, but I don't think there's any question that, there were some weirdness. The guy, I think if you are a for a lot of the cutaways to the dugout during times of stress last year did not instill confidence. I will put
Mhm.
it that way, and so that's something that he's got to work on. And I think, and for the record, I hear a lot being like it's the clubhouse that matters. It's not the fans that make the decision, and that's true. But like public confidence, that matters. Like you saw what happened after the O'Neill and the Contreras stuff happened last year. That was not confined to the clubhouse. And that was not just the Cardinals fan base. Like like the rest of baseball were like, what's going on over there?
Yeah.
Like what's happening? And I think that like it is reasonable. That's a lot of pressure to put on, and I don't think Marmol necessarily handled it all that well. I do think uh, paring back some of the things. He had a lot on his plate last year. They gave him a lot to do and a lot to figure out, and he didn't always succeed at it. And I think that can be somewhat expected of a second year manager. But he's now a third manager. They've tried to clear some stuff out for him. If the same problems rise up this year, I do think it's more on him. But yeah, I mean, like certainly, if they get off to a bad start, I will be very curious to see how he handles it, because when things went bad last year, you could see it on his face during the games. You could see it on his face during the press conference, and you need to not to.
Yeah.
And listen, there were times where Bernie and I used to talk about Mike Schilt's happy talk, and like everything's fine,
Mhm.
everything's so on. And that could be frustrating, but I do think there was a method to that madness. I didn't always understand what Marmol was trying to get across last year, and that's a problem because the manager is a communicator, not just between the clubhouse and the front office, but to the fan base and to the reporters that ask him questions. That's a large part of the job. I think it's a larger part of the job than it used to be, and I think that's something that he definitely did not succeed in last year.
So with Carpenter, with Crawford, with Lynn, with all these people they have added with the leadership tag added to that, we've talked a lot about it being for the players and stuff like that, but it sounds like you're thinking it's also part for Marmol that some of the stuff that he had to deal with, he won't have to now because those guys will step up.
Yeah, but I also do think there's something to the idea though that like I think it was reasonable last year if the front office thought, well, this team has veterans. It's got Wainwright, it's got
Mhm.
Goldschmidt who just won the MVP, it's got Nolan Arenado. But I think one thing that we learned last year, and I don't even necessarily mean this as a criticism of Arenado and Goldschmidt, but that's not who they are.
Yeah.
Like they're not those kind of dudes, and I think that and I think there was underperformance on their part last year, but I also think that that's not that they're not, they're not Pujols, they're not Molina, they're not those kind of guys. And listen, it's not like I feel like this gets overstated sometimes. Like when Carpenter was there, I didn't see like Carpenter doing these fiery clubhouse chats all the time when he was with the Cardinals. I think it's more he's respected and there's familiarity there necessarily that he's this like huge vocal. I think people like him and people respect him, and that can't. And he's more of a personality, get along, go along personality than Arenado or Goldschmidt. I think they're both affable and they like those guys. But like we saw it last year, like Arenado, you saw the stress last year put on Arenado. You saw it in his face. You saw it during games. You saw him he just didn't. It wasn't really that. The fun of Arenado often is like, wow, look how easy this is for him, look how remarkable he is at doing this. That's a lot of the fun of watching Arenado play. You didn't see that last year. And so I think what we learned about specifically Arenado last year is if things aren't going well, he's probably not a throw the bats in the clubhouse guy and what are we doing, what's going on here. And that's okay. I don't mean that. I also would not be that guy in a clubhouse. I don't think it's a criticism of Arenado, but I think that, with Marmol not necessarily being that kind of manager for whatever reason. And I think that was actually part of the problem with the O'Neill thing. I don't think that like people didn't like that he said that with O'Neill. I just think there was a sense of, are you real? Like, he kind of tried to play LaRussa tough guy without having LaRussa's 30 plus years of being able to do that. And I think getting him help in that, I don't think he handled that well, but I also don't think he had a lot of backup to help him out with that. So I think Crawford and Carpenter can't hurt. But what's the old joke about the boxer talking to the priest when the boxer says, "Pray for me"? He's like, "I'll do what I can, but it'll help if you can hit." And if help if you can punch, and I think it'll help if Carpenter and Crawford can produce. Because that I'm happy to have them there, and I like both of them. And it was exciting for me to get out my Carpenter jersey. I love Matt Carpenter, and I think it's forgotten a little bit sometimes how much criticism Carpenter actually took from the fan base, often a lot. And so I think a lot of that's the Twitter fan base as opposed to the real fan to the in-person fan base. I think there's a difference there, but certainly I love Carpenter, and I'm excited to have him back, and I can't wait to watch him back. But that bench is shorter now. Like that bench is tighter now. And like, if you're telling me in a big situation against a really hard throwing late inning relief guy, I mean, I don't know. Are we sure we want Carpenter up there or Crawford over there other than a Burleson or a Baker? Because that's what we've got now.
Yeah.
And so that veteran leadership better work out because it's been a long time since Carpenter hit in any place other than Yankee Stadium the way that we remember Matt Carpenter hitting.
So you talked about the slow start. If for some reason they do that again, which again, hopefully not, but if they do start to look at different managerial things, the fan base is going to be clamoring for Yadier Molina, who, as far as I know, still hasn't made it to camp.
Yeah.
But like you said, that doesn't seem to fit anybody for this. I know Yachty wants to manage, but none of that situation sounds like it's a good idea.
I don't like listen, you know how much I love Carpenter. I love Molina more. Like it's Yachty for crying out. We all love Yachty. But man, like I understand. I actually feel like Mo has handled this pretty well, but I don't know if there was a way to handle this perfectly. Like Yachty wants to come back and be a manager. He said he wants to be a manager. But it kind of doesn't look like he wants to quite put in the legwork that you kind of have to do to show that you really want to be a manager. And I don't just mean not showing up for spring. I mean, like as a player, if Yachty wants to go coach his basketball team for a weekend, I didn't sweat that. He'd earned the right? He's earned the right to do that. He totally earned the right to do that as a player. As a manager, like I gotta tell you, I would not like that at all if my manager did anything like that. And frankly, I would question his commitment to what we're trying to do here. I think Yachty's earned that as a player. I don't know if he's earned that as a manager. And I think you cannot say no sane person in the Cardinals organization would say, yeah, I know Yachty wants to manage, but come on, he's going to have to show us more. Like they're going to be like, obviously we want Yachty to be a part of this organization, and we do want Yachty to be a part of this organization. But like for crying out loud, like Chris Carpenter's been there, like all these people actually have no formal role with Jason Isringhausen. Well, has been living there the whole spring, and they have not. They're not saying please let this lead me to be a manager. I think I would say the clamoring of those who are clamoring for Yachty to be manager of the Cardinals, I would just like to see him, I don't know, just like maybe show up every day for a year before we're necessarily ready to see Yachty do that. Do I think that Yachty would be a good manager? Sure. I mean, he obviously knows baseball. He's a really smart guy, but I don't know that's like that kind of manager is not around that much in baseball anymore. Like the idea of like LaRussa didn't work, right? Like later on, I think it's forgotten sometimes that like LaRussa limped to the finish line in 11. Let's not forget what happened in game 5 of game 4 of that series, game 5 of that series, right? Speaking of Lance Lynn being back, it's a different job, and I don't know. I love Yachty and I want him to be part of this organization. But if he really wants to be a manager, I do not blame the organization if they would like to see considerably more from Yachty before they started seriously considering that.
I think it would be under 10 days of having to do media availability after every game, especially losses, before we had some sort of newsworthy event.
Oh,
For
for crying out loud. I mean, like, honestly, listen, I've never been a beat reporter for the Cardinals, but they got Yachty stories. They got plenty of Yachty stories. And that's the job, man. I think that, like, I don't know. Listen, the fact that Yachty's not shown up at camp to help out for anything to me that's the proof of the pudding right there, right? Like the idea of listen, if Marmol does not make it, the idea that you're going to bring in Yachty that's the situation that feels like, not only does it feel a little like desperation, it feels like they're panicking like they did last year.
yeah,
And I do not necessarily think if they get off to a bad start and make a move with Marmol, I don't actually necessarily think that's panicking. I don't actually think that's panicking at all. I think that's understandable for a team that has a lot on the line this year and may need a kick in the pants. We've seen it. Like the Phillies just did this
hmm
2 years ago and went to the World Series. Like it happens. So I don't know. I'm not saying I'm advocating for that move, but I would understand it. Bringing in Yachty, who again not in the dugout, it feels very Reds bringing in Pete Rose because everybody loves the guy, sort of thing. Now Yachty is not Pete Rose, and thank God for that. But I do. It feels like it would feel like an organization that does not have a very firm hand on the till. Well, I would
yeah,
probably put it that way.
yeah,
If that something like that were to happen.
yeah. I mean, if the season was already you're already waving a white flag, maybe you're thinking of him, let him try it out as an interim thing, and but no promises. But even that feels, yeah, because once you put him in there, it's very difficult to remove him.
Yeah, this is. I
Um,
mean, like Georgetown couldn't fire Patrick Ewing, and he won like 5 games a year. I mean, it's hard, right? Like,
mhm,
and I don't know. It does not. Listen, I want, like, it's Yachty. I want him to be a part of the organization, but he's got to want to. He can't just. You don't give a guy a manager job out of respect.
right.
like just because you respect his part of the, you don't, that's not the way it works. So and I think Yachty sometimes maybe thinks it works that way, and that would be that it would be worrisome if I thought the organization thought that way.
Yeah. So let's look at this division then. I mean, where do you like you said, going into last year, we all thought the Cardinals were going to win. I think there's still an aspect right now of, especially with the division the way it is, that we kind of feel like the Cardinals are going to go back to where they're supposed to be. Is that how you see this? And who's the most challenging?
Yeah, I think that if I haven't made my predictions yet for
Mhm.
MLB.com, but I think I might pick the Cubs. It gives me no joy to say that, but and I'm actually not sure that they got Bellinger for a great deal, but I'm not necessarily sold that Bellinger is. I think the guy he is closer. And I think he's definitely not going to be old MVP, MVP Bellinger, but I actually don't think that he's even going to be last year Bellinger. Like
Mhm.
every number, but underneath the hood, his numbers do not look like they should have last year, and so I don't think that like he like pushes them over the top. But like that's a team that has a plan. Like their defense, like the thing that made the Cubs better last year was their defense. I think Swanson is like that's Swanson's great. Like Swanson like changed that kind of whole team. He fixed their defense like immediately, and they seem like I think there's reason to be excited. I think Suzuki is like a quiet down ballot MVP candidate for them this year. I think the Cubs are going to be a little better than just NL Central win 85 games good. So the question is whether, like, I think 89 or 90 wins is going to, I think the Cubs are very capable of winning 90 games this year. The question is whether the Cardinals can. And I think that, I don't know if they're built to win 90 games. I think they're
Mhm.
built to win 87 and maybe catch a break. And I think that's the concern, particularly with Gray. Now, the thing to be excited about, I think you're going to like the thing to get excited about with the Cardinals is like there's the idea of watching Nolan Gorman and Jordan Walker in the lineup together for the next 6 7 years is exciting. Those are special Walker in particular, but in Gorman, there's injury concerns, but like Walker and Gorman, like thank God the Cardinals did not trade Gorman, because like that, to have a dude, and while he's fine at second base, he'll be DH a lot, but like that's special power. And I feel like we've spent the last few years trying to find that left-handed bat, and like he's right there. And like I think there's reason to be excited about Donovan. I think Nootbaar, like he's got to stay healthy too. But like you look at this lineup and it could work. Like you can
Yeah.
see how there is real power and tonnage and on base, and like this is a lineup that could really really come together, and that is exciting. And I think that's kind of the idea, is the pitching just needs to be enough. And that's why I liked the moves of bringing in Lynn and bringing in Gibson and bringing in these guys. I like that idea, and obviously Gray. I like that idea because what it is you need the pitching. I think the pitching can be average and this team can win the division. The question is whether the pitching is going to be average, because last year, I don't know if you remember this or not, it was not. It was definitely not last year. And I think that's the concern. So I'm I have to say I don't really love a lot of the moves the Reds made this offseason. I think the Reds could have been smarter about how they added to that. And it's very weird to see. I think like Ellie Dela Cruz is like sixth in MVP odds right now. That is insane. We had some struggle. We had like a lot of like Walker got sit down last year, and even by the end of it, he was obviously playing a lot better, but he was still
Right.
not like the guy I think we're going to see in the next couple of years. And Walker was so much better than De La Cruz last year. So the Reds. I think that there's excitement about the Reds that I'm not sure is necessarily backed up by a lot of evidence. And I think the Brewers I think are going to be a little better. I think people have kind of given up on them after the Burns trade. But I think they're. But honestly, like it would not shock me to see. Like I'll put it this way, if the Pirates, it would not shock me to see the Pirates pass the Reds or the Brewers this year. I'm not sold really on any of those three teams. I think it's the Cubs and the Cardinals. And for the record, I joke about that because I've said before the Pirates could pass the Reds or the Brewers, and people are like, wow, really? I don't know. They passed the Cardinals last year, so it certainly can happen. So yeah, I think that I think the Cubs are the favorites in the division. The Cardinals, because I just think the Cubs' floor is higher than the Cardinals is. I think the Cardinals' ceiling is. I'll take the Cardinals' offense over
Yeah.
just about anyone else's in the division's anything, but the floor could fall out on the Cardinals' pitching, and because we know we just saw it. So that's my concern.
Yeah, I do think, as it referenced earlier on, they've made some very smart moves on the bullpen, and so you do hope that you get 5 or 6 tolerable innings, with a quality start type of thing from these guys, and the offense does what they can do, and the bullpen holds any kind of lead that they have, and that may not be the most uh, stress-free way to watch ball games this year, but it's a lot better than last year.
Yeah, and it is more of the time, right?
Mhm.
Like Heim Bloom is really smart about that. Like, there's an argument to be like, listen, what you really need is a deep bullpen. And like the idea, like I think we have this idea that like Lance Lynn is gonna throw 7, 8 innings every game, and Gibby. Gibby,
Mm.
sorry, just kidding, just kidding. But that the Gibson, like these guys are innings eaters, but even the innings eaters today are not like the old time Cardinal fan misses an old guy like Jose De Leon, right? Who
Mhm.
gave you 210, 215, like what, like 4 guys, 5 guys in baseball through 200 innings last year. You're not gonna have those guys. The Cardinals did what you want them to do, which is to get bullpen dudes that throw hard, and you can figure it out. And I actually feel like the fixing of the Cardinals pitching staff is a multi-year project from the minors on up, and I think
Yeah.
you've seen some fruits of that. Dane Perry has written very well about this, about you're seeing some fruits of that, and I think there's reason to be encouraged about that. But for right now, I wish the backup plan were Jordan Montgomery. But if the backup plan is not Jordan Montgomery, having a bunch of dudes in the bullpen that throw hard is not the worst strategy.
No, and it's that is a lot of fun to watch when it's all going well,
We're
and
gonna
again, there's
like
enough.
Middleton.
Yeah,
Middleton's a guy I'm excited about. I think that's a dude I think that everyone's gonna really like.
yeah, and so far Riley O'Brien has kind of shown to be the
Yeah,
guy that they thought they were getting in the trade too. So,
yeah.
and there's enough of those guys that there can be 1 or 2 at Memphis that are worth the rotation, right? I mean, so if somebody does go down, it's not necessarily, well, depending on who it is, of course, but even in that bullpen, if somebody goes down, there's probably somebody that can give you basically the same stuff.
Yeah, and they didn't go spend a ton of money on it. And
Right.
listen, I would love for them to have $300 million payroll and just get whatever they want. But at a certain level, if you're going to crib spending somewhere, the bullpen is the place to do it. And I think you can find value in there. And listen, it's very strange. I talked about this with Bernie because everyone's like, "Wow, thanks Heim Bloom for like the rest of the Cardinals, like they also the rest of the Cardinals front office also is aware of that having guys that throw hard in the bullpen is important. I think Bloom has, because he's done that, he did it so well with the Rays and even with the Red Sox to a lesser extent. I think that he gets a lot of credit for it, and I think he's a very smart guy, and I'm glad he's in the front office. But I also, it's not that revolutionary to get low cost guys that throw hard for your bullpen.
No, in fact, I think the Cardinals are, Mo has said that they had those ideas, they ran them by Bloom, but they kind of targeted some of those guys anyway. So,
Yeah, it's not like he
uh,
came in the conference room being like, guys, I got an idea. And then like, no, I'm sorry. I thought we were just all having Tony Fawcett's clones. We're gonna be our no, that it's and I think they've been strategic and smart in grabbing those guys. But I think that it's not, they're not in reinventing the wheel.
yeah. And it's difficult to get those kind of guys in the starting rotation because it is so expensive, and that's why you hope that people like Tink Hintz develop and give you, and Takoa Roby and others that can maybe give you that on the bargain basement side of things.
Yeah, and honestly, to me that's another reason I'm glad they're continuing to stretch out Liberator. I know he was good in the bullpen last year, and I know some people. I think his stuff definitely plays in the bullpen. I think you have to give him one more shot to make it as a starter. I think that this stuff. I mean, like, listen, we saw in the Rays game last year he's capable of it, right? Like we've
Right.
seen him do it before. We know he's got the skills to do it, and if it doesn't work, fine. But like, it feels like Joe Sheehan has written before about one of the reasons he doesn't like to support relievers for the Hall of Fame is relievers are really failed starters. And the example he actually always uses is Andy Bennis, compares Andy Bennis to Trevor Hoffman, where basically they came up at the same time, and Bennis was good enough to stay a starter, and Hoffman wasn't. So they put Hoffman to the bullpen and became this great closer. And Bennis was just a very high quality, a very innings eater, good quality starting pitcher, but was not that. Right. And like, I feel like a guy like Bennis is more, this weird thing to say about Andy Bennis against a Hall of Famer, but like you give a guy every single opportunity to be a starter until you're like, okay, fine. Now we gave it every shot. So I'm glad they're doing that.
Yeah. Well, I have kept you plenty long, and I know you have a lot of other things you probably need to do, including maybe sleep. I don't know.
Nah.
So thanks for joining me tonight. And again, I know you're writing everywhere, but what is there anything particular people should be looking for?
Yeah, well, the best way to get all my stuff, I have a free weekly newsletter. It's William F. Leitch, LEITCH.substack.com. Everything I make is through there. And you can buy my books. My books, How Lucky and The Time Has Come, are available at bookstores everywhere. And Are We Winning, by the way, which is my most recent nonfiction book, which is about baseball and the Cardinals and fatherhood. So I wrote it before I was an actual father. I read it now and I'm like, oh, I knew nothing. But if you're a baseball fan, that's my baseball book. But yeah, I'm working on the new novel now that's due over Memorial Day. So I'm going to be the most excited. Like the Cardinals better not be out of the race by Memorial Day because I want to celebrate turning in my book by watching as much baseball. I'm going to be watching as much baseball as possible anyway, but I'm going to want to really indulge. And if they're already out by June, I'm going to be very upset.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully that is not the case, and we'll continue to believe that until proven otherwise. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, Will, thanks a lot for joining me, and we'll do it again sometime.
Of course, thanks for having me. Enjoy the season, and of course, go Cardinals.
They just won't go away.
All right, we're here back in our coach's corner with Mr. Medlock, Coach Medlock. Tulsa Hale gets the season started, Alan, and how did it go?
It's been a good week for us. We did lose a heartbreaker in the opener to our rival crosstown. They beat us 8-7. We had a 3-run lead in 2 different occasions during the game, but it was a darn good game. Good for Tulsa baseball. We'll get them next time. We had a couple of key errors out of some of our younger guys, but we'll be all right. We pitched well, hit extremely well. We've really been hitting the ball. This the best off our offense has looked since I've taken over. We rebounded with a big win, come from behind win on Saturday. And we came in, but we lost our first 2 district games with a historically really, really good team. I mean, they'll be knocking on the state tournament door. We lost pretty good on Monday, but pitched extremely well and played their number one. We went toe to toe with them yesterday for we took a 2-0 lead, or they were up 2-0 going into the 5th of a 7-inning, of course, high school game, and they pulled away late after we ran into some pitch count issues, but yeah, we're in a pretty good spot right now. We're playing pretty good baseball. When we clean it up, we're going to be really tough to beat. We have a gauntlet here at the first of our district schedule of 3 historically good teams that will be right there at the state tournament when it's all said and done. But what we have figured out is that the team that we played this week, which is close to where I grew up, that's kind of where we would like to go for our regionals if we can find to make it happen. They have one of the better ballparks on this side of the state, and it doesn't intimidate our kids at all because we played over there so much. So we think that we're in a pretty good spot, even though we're in the learning process and stuff like that, but we're kind of coming out of it. We're looking really, really good right now.
Well, you told me before we got started here that your win on Saturday was the earliest you've ever had a win, at least when you've been there.
Yeah, my 3
in
years.
the program.
Yeah, my 3 years is the earliest we've had a win. First weekend win, it's first time that we've had that. It usually takes us to about mid-March whenever we kind of get past this. How they do the districts is they front load you with the three best teams, and then what you'll do is you come to the 3 medium teams in the middle, and then you fight for playoff seeding after that. That allows the top 3 teams to play those last few weekends of the season to kind of see where everybody lines up. And we're trying to get into those top 3, and little by little, we think we can do it. So yeah, you get your schedule lightens up a little bit around the time that you get back from spring break. And that won't be any different this year, but we feel like we're in a pretty good spot. Weather permitting, we will play 2 games that we think that we were better than both teams this week. Whether we play well or not was yet to be seen, but I feel like we have a little juice right now. Our seniors are really leading the way, and they really bounced back from a tough loss on Monday to play extremely well on Tuesday. So we're kind of hoping that the rain holds off and we're able to get these games in this weekend. And you go into a series with Pryor, who is historically a 4A, 5A state tournament team. If you're 500, you feel pretty good about it. We have the pitching that can keep us in some games, and you compete long enough and you're going to win some of these. And, our daily aspiration for today that I have our players say was it's everything's impossible until it's done. And, we're going to knock off one of these guys one day.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully soon.
Sure.
You're talking about the weather, and that is one of those things that high school baseball has to deal with, especially since they, so early in the spring.
Sure.
How do y'all get around that, or do you just have to, make up games, or you just kind of wait some games out and play on wet fields?
Yeah, well, usually, as many games as you're allowed to schedule, and we go pretty heavy. I try to leave some room for error on those things to where you can. I try to go 3 games a week, and that allows you to pick up a 4th if you need it. And both of the teams that, if we were to get rained out on Friday with the weather, it's our friends out of Oklahoma City. They would want to play again. We're home and home this year for the first time, so they owe us a home date, and we're gonna go back there on that Friday of spring break and play an early afternoon game. Most of the teams are you kind of realize that you have to get them, or you don't have to get them in districts. You have to get them in, but the ones that you schedule on your own with your friends and get friends in the business and stuff like that, you're usually pretty flexible to try to make those up. And honestly, in Oklahoma, that's just how it goes. I mean, we've been very lucky on weather. It's been windy, but never bad situation. But a 70% chance today or tomorrow and Friday. And hopefully you can skirt around, you get your field ready as much as you can and see how much it can take. And you just have to be patient. And I'm not always the best about that, but that's just, it is what it is.
Yeah, I think I've told you before, but the year, my senior year, I was doing the stats for our high school team, and we had two pitchers, really, really good pitchers. One of which wound up making it to Double A with the Cardinals, and one of which was even better, and in high school just didn't pan out after college and all that kind of stuff. But that was about it. I mean, they might have had a third pitcher here and there, but there wasn't much. And we had so many rainouts that year and reschedulings and stuff like that those two guys basically pitched. I think 95% of the games. I mean,
Sure.
the spawn and saying and pray for rain. I mean, that really was what it was that year. And so, yeah, if it can work to your advantage if you're a little bit shorthanded.
Sure. That's and we can play it by ear a little bit like that. Like we have a bunch of arms that can keep us in games. We have two, possibly three, that can win you a lot of ball games. One in particular. I mean, Levin Whaler last night. He's my junior pitcher. He's the one of the better athletes in school, maybe one of the strongest kids in the school. And he his breaking stuff is college level. He's really good, and he struck out five over 4.5 innings last night until he ran into some pitch count issues. But he was really good, and it's one of those, if you can get him enough rest and you can ride it out a little bit, you'll be in a pretty good spot. So sometimes it works to your advantage, and that's it's what it is. That's what a lot of people don't understand is the game. Our coaches in other sports don't get a lot of time is that. You sometimes have to expect to take a whooping one time just to save pitching for the next time that you want to play.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that's kind of with high school baseball. I mean, if I was on some advisory board, the way that I would approach high school sports is I would separate them by the breaks. Like I like high school baseball. I wish you could do it to where you could start after spring break, especially for your district games, because that allows a lot of your athletes to play those three sports that everybody tries to promote that you're going to play. Whether that's basketball, wrestling, football, and baseball, and allows you to kind of do that, and allows you to maybe avoid some of that weather and get kids ready for sports season to season.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's ever going to happen just because everything's so popular now and you want to start as early as possible. And honestly, I think they like to do it just because of how it's so much easier just to start on March 1 and finish by middle May whenever you get into graduation time and stuff like that. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but still, I think it would be beneficial for kids and for opportunities if you could separate it out a little bit more. It's just probably not going to happen.
No, I mean, especially when you are limited by that calendar, it's really hard to keep kids after graduation. College can do it a little bit, but
Yeah,
I don't figure you have that opportunity. So
sure.
you also got to deal with cold, right? I mean, you think it, and as much as the weather has been the last little bit, very warm and all that stuff, but you're talking about that front coming through, and y'all may be playing in some colder games
Yeah.
on Saturday. So how do you manage that, especially for your pitchers?
Yeah, that's you have to set in a sleeves rule, which is difficult for a team like us because we don't have the resources to have four different sets of uniforms. We
Right.
have three, and we have three jerseys, and we wear the same white pants. That we double up on some of the pants sometimes, but it's difficult for us to play some of these teams that, last night, I mean, we got there early enough to watch some of Clamore's batting practice. And I mean, they're all wearing batting practice tops and sleeves and all kinds of stuff. And they're all mismatched, meaning they have sets of each, and those are things that we just can't do. So you just kind of have to be picky in how you battle it. You have to get a set of sleeves and everything for your guys and a jacket for your pitchers a lot of times. And, I just hope that, and most of the time this wins out. I mean, they're kids that want to go out and compete and battle, and a lot of times it just simply doesn't bother them.
Yeah.
It's last night we played, and what we did is we played a varsity game and then followed it up with a JV game. And I'm telling you, that dugout was cold last night, and it was one of those to where you wanted to get out of there as quick as possible just because it was breezy. And I've been in situations right before spring break that's probably the coldest weather I've been in. I mean, you're out there in baseball pants and everything, and that wind comes through, and it'll bite you. It's just one of those. You just kind of have to play with the elements. That's another thing that goes into a spring sport, kind of like a summer sport. There may be a time where you get shut down in late summer, early fall of the heat and softball. That's outdoor sports. You just have to deal with it more than most.
Yeah. Yeah. it's a little bit of a wrinkle, and again, hopefully not one you have to deal with too
Sure.
much going forward. All right, so you got a player of the week this week?
Yeah, I'm gonna go. We were really, really impressed by how our one of our top dogs, Levin Whaler, pitched this week. I mean, he really may have opened up a lot of eyes. We have a senior center fielder that would have been knocking on the door. He pitched really well Saturday. Actually, got the win Saturday. So, co-player of the year was Elijah Weathers. He's a senior that's really come a long way with me. He was the kid that just got off the wrestling mat and started in center field and hits third for us. I mentioned him last week, but. Probably have to go to Levin this week. He's racking up some strikeouts. He's keeping us in ball games, and you can really feel the tide starting to turn. And that's been a lot of fun this year for me. I mean, I went out one time for a mound visit yesterday just to slow things down, and literally what I told him, I said, "Hey, keep doing what you're doing because basically we really enjoy watching this. That this is good baseball. Plays are being made. We're being really fluid. We're communicating. We're the team that we thought we would be during practices, and sometimes it's just with us, you keep competing and it's going to happen. And I feel like we're right there and Levin's led the way.
Well, I look forward to talking to you next week. Hopefully we will have a couple of those wins to talk about. And we'll look forward to seeing who the player is then. So
yeah, we got it. Next week we will go just a little rundown. We go Friday, Saturday this week. We play Monday, Tuesday next week, and then we head into spring break, and we have some fun events that I'll go over next week on next week's show about stuff we'll be doing over spring break.
Sounds fun. Look forward to it, and we'll talk next week.
All right, my friend. I appreciate you.
Burke deep out in left center. Tavares pulled over into a right center. Lane pacing in his right field position. Albert digs back in. Open stance, deep in the box. Bends at the knee. Holds it down on the end. League is ready. With 2 on and 2 out. His 0-1 pitch. It's coming. Swinging a long one. There it is, baby. The Cardinals take the lead as Albert Pujols comes through in the pitch. And the Redbirds lead this baby 5-4. What'd I tell you, folks? David Eckstein, the man. This could be a crushing blow to the Houston club. Albert Pujols, you talk about a most valuable player. How is that? Woo! That thing left the ballpark in a hurry. A 3-run home run, and the Cardinals lead 5-4.